Divorced men of Reddit, what moment with your former wife made me think yup, I'm asking this girl to divorce me? We met and spent the first 7 years of our married life on the west coast, then moved east. 5 years later, I took a job back on the west coast, but it was the middle of the school year, so I went out ahead and lived on my own until everyone could join me. Things hadn't been very good between us for a while, but I hadn't articulated it to her, or even myself, beyond vague feelings of dissatisfaction. One weekend, out there on my own, I decided to take a day and drive to one of my favorite towns, a town in which I had lived long before I knew her, a town we had visited often while married. It was late afternoon, was about to head back to my hotel when I realized that I could visit a particular beach that had special meaning to me from my earlier life there. I stopped at a convenience store, grabbed a grolsch like I used to drink on that beach, and drove out there, hiked out to a specific spot I remembered, sat down, popped the beer, and looked out over the ocean, and it hit me that I hadn't done that in over 20 years. Whenever we'd visit the area, I'd suggest stopping at the beach, but she wasn't interested and would always veto the idea. I'm sure reading this it seems like the tiniest thing, but it was the catalyst for me realizing just how completely dissatisfied I was with our relationship. I think from the time I sat down, I knew it was over within maybe 10 minutes. Just sitting there, sipping my beer, looking at the ocean. Grolsch is indeed a Dutch beer. It can be had in distinctive green bottles with hinged, resealable ceramic caps. I chose it because when I had lived in that place before, and had headed out to that specific beach with friends, I'd always bring grolsch. This answer is the most captivating thing I've heard. Preface: we were doing a trial separation. She moved into the spare bedroom of our apartment. Divorce had been thrown around, but we still spent time together and slept together. I wasn't seriously considering divorce, but rather counseling, etc. Up until the day I came home from work at the same time I came home every day, and she was in her room being fricked by some random guy she met on Tinder. She had not told him she was married. I kicked him out of the apartment and made it clear to her I would be moving out as soon as possible. Must add that she expressed interest in counseling as well, and that we discussed ground rules for the separation, one of which was do not frick other people. I moved out because I couldn't afford the apartment on my own. I didn't kick the guy's butt, but I did tell him while punching the door that he had 3 minutes to get out of my apartment. I said if he wasn't out in 3 minutes I was going to break down the door, and it wouldn't be to shake hands. Proud of that line from enraged me. Usually I'm not very articulate when angry. He was out in a little over 2 minutes. 15 years in, and I find texts on her phone. Completely blindsided. No clue she had it in her to cheat. Told me it was just texting. Begged for forgiveness. I caved. A month later, checked the phone bill to find that it never stopped. Confronted her again. Cue more begging and more denial on my part that she would let the life we had built go down in flames. This went on for a few months. So many promises. One night, I caught her on the phone when she thought I had left. Suddenly it's not just texts. Sometimes it was phone calls too. Just a friend she could talk to that she let things go too far with. Promised to break all contact. Swore it was never physical. Then I found emails. She detailed things that made me sick to read, but also included descriptions of his house. She broke finally, but swore it was all just in the line of duty. That's how she met, you see? Visiting nurse service, and this guy was a client. Promised she was done. Loved me, you see? No chance she was going to let 15 years go like that. I wasn't buying it anymore though. She announced she was going out one night with a work friend. Promised they were only going to the bar, then she'd be home. Maybe late, but not too late. She had taken over her own phone account by then, but wasn't bright enough to understand that Google Latitude was still showing me where she was, and I wasn't about to show my hand. She kissed me goodbye and beelined right for his house, and was there until the wee hours of the morning. Once I knew where she had headed, I called her dad and my best friend to keep me from doing anything dumb. I will love them both forever for keeping me calm while my world went freaking insane all around me. My father-in-law offered to stay with the kids and wait for her to get home. Around 3 AM, while couch surfing my buddy's place, she sent me a nasty text asking where the frick I thought I was. I texted her a screenshot of her little GPS dot at her boyfriend's and let her know I'd be sending her some paperwork soon. Props to the father-in-law for being willing to help out even when it's his daughter doing all that. She started working at a job with people that were closer to her age, 25-30, instead of a job where her co-workers were in their late 40s, early 50s. She wanted to go out and hang out with them rather than come home and be with her family, myself and our at the time 2-year-old daughter and a godforsaken cat that she just had to have. There were a lot of other little things that added up over time, mainly her desire to drink and drive, without our daughter in the car thankfully, and 4 days a week of not coming home until 2 or 3 in the morning and not telling a soul where she was or what she was doing. After a month of that, she said she wanted a divorce. I fought it with everything I had for 3 months. Decided to go to counseling, where the counselor asked her ex-wife, "In your mind is this marriage already over?" After a literal 5-minute silence, I had the answer I needed. Separated a week later and divorced a year later. We're still civil for our daughter's sake. But I will say that after the initial shock of actually going through a divorce after us both proclaiming to do whatever it takes and never getting a divorce, I will say I'm much happier now. I was able to save up and buy a house for my daughter and I, which I never would have been able to do had I stayed married. I'd found evidence of potential cheating. Despite this, I still was willing to work on things. I confronted her about her feelings towards me, not the cheating. When I point blank asked her if she was interested in counseling or trying to work things out, she said no. That was the first time. It would have been better to have stuck with it. There was a tumultuous time after that where we flip-flopped and were trying to work things out. Sorta. She complicated things. I had broached the cheating with her and we made rules during our maintenance period. One of which was that she was no longer to have contact with her friend she was cheating with. I ended up finding out that she was still Facebook friends with him. When I calmly explained why this would hurt me, she turned it around that I was the bad guy. I started living with a friend at this point. During my drunken half-sobbing tirade where I explained everything to him, I finally realized that I don't want to be with this woman anymore. She doesn't love, respect, or care for me at all, and I deserve those things. Moved out, moved on, and have since found a wonderful woman that I will marry in April. Even though I figured I would never get married again, I got hurt. It sucked. It sucked really bad. I never expected to get a divorce. I took some time to work on myself and address the mistakes that I made in my marriage and past relationships. I ended up finding a person who 100% is in sync with me and communicates like a mature adult. She is super smart and helps me through my emotions as I help her through hers. I did the complete 180 on marriage. It wasn't a struggle, it feels right. I thought long and hard after I had decided to get married. I wanted to make sure I was not making the same mistakes again. I believe I've found my true partner and each day gives me more reasons to believe that to be true. I always refused to raise my voice during arguments, which usually made her crazier and scream louder. After one such argument, during which our 3-year-old daughter was playing upstairs, she started coming down at the same time her mother was storming up the stairs like a child of comparable age. Our daughter was in the way and her mother got in her face and screamed, "God, I freaking hate you, move." Of course, my daughter came to me, hurt. That was the moment I decided it was over. This was 13 years ago. My daughters are now 16 and 12. Unfortunately, I found out the hard way that, particularly in that day and age, family courts were seriously skewed towards the favor of the mother in many cases unless there was proof of serious neglect, drug abuse or physical shaming abuse. The girls, I believe, are fairly well adjusted and doing okay. Their mother changed in regards to her direct dealings with them, however continued and still uses them as a way to hurt me whenever she sees an opportunity. I've taken her to court for custodial interference, which is punishable up to 30 days in jail and a $1,000 fine, and they slapped her on the wrist with not so much as an admonishment. It's fricked, but I do the best to keep an eye on the situation and try to give them as much stability as possible when they're around me, so they have an idea of what normal is. Me and my ex were always having ups and downs. Cutting up my clothes when I was out with friends, cutting my hair when I was asleep, random violence and screaming fits. The usual. We did the normal things couples were supposed to do and it seemed to prolong the episode for a time. We bought a house for example. Well, after we had the house, the next thing we needed was a cat. She loved it very much when it was a kitten, but as it grew up it became more independent. It's a cat duh, and she couldn't take this and became aggressive towards it. I remember walking in one day and she picked up the cat and threw it up in the air. It bounced off of the ceiling and then I threw her butt out of the house, bouncing her crap off the curb. I still have the cat. It amazes me the patience some people have. The moment someone does some psycho crap with anything that cuts, I am freaking gone. Whether that is my hair or my clothes. My next thought is, this person is going to cut my dong off. They're just working their way up. Be glad you got out intact. She had lost her job, again, after quitting a decent one because she didn't get along with her boss. Anyways, a few months go by and I'm doing everything. Cooking, laundry, dishes, yard work, etc. I'd ask the kids, what does mom do all day, and they said she plays on the computer all day. So the final straw came when I came home from work and had to wash dishes so I could make dinner. Dinner is made, so I tell family it's ready. She comes to get a plate and serves herself first instead of our youngest child, who was 4 at the time and couldn't serve himself. As I watched this unfold, it dawned on me, if I'm going to do all the work I might as well do it by myself or find a partner to share the load with, because she clearly didn't want to be on my team. To those mentioning depression, yes, she was, and maybe still is. She was on meds for it and we went to counseling after the birth of one of our kids and she had postpartum depression. At this time she stepped out on our marriage with at least 3 guys. I finally got proof with hidden caller ID and a voice activated tape recorder hidden under our bed. Yep, got to hear them freaking. Long story, but we stayed together. IDK if the counseling helped or not. I also need to add that she was never good with money. Blew a small inheritance in record fashion. She would give me money for joint bills and I was handing it back over so she could put gas in her car or she had bill of hers due. One year we got a nice tax refund and she promptly tells me she owes her stepdad $2,000. WTF. Still stayed. This was something that had been building for years. Sometimes when my ex and I used to fight, she would decide that she wasn't going to go to some function or honor plans we had previously made. Sometimes very last minute, like hanging out with friends, dinner with my family, etc. For example, we got into some argument and she decided to not go to my only sister's wedding. BTW, the wedding was that day. A year later, she did the same thing during a fight. She threatened me again, telling me that she decided to not go with me to Texas for a reunion with some of the guys I served in the Marines with. I didn't fight it this time and just said okay. Several days later she tried to renege on her threat and actually tried to turn it around on me, saying how mean I was for not wanting her to come with me. I told her that I was actually relieved that she wasn't going. I could hang out with my friends that I hadn't seen since I got out and it would be nice to not have to worry about her crazy, insecure drama. But that realization, that I was going to be happier without her, was the moment I knew we were done. My wife at the time told me that she had called a local radio station which often discusses hardships that military families go through and sometimes gives away $1,000 to a family in need of help. She said that she informed the radio station of my deployment and how I didn't come back the same, and she told them about our daughter, 2 months premature and only 8 months old at the time, who had numerous health problems. My wife explained to me that the radio station hadn't given away the $1,000 in quite a few weeks, so they were going to give $10,000 for her telling such a heartfelt story. She called me while I was at work to tell me what had happened and I was really excited. Asked my SNCOIC to help me draw up a savings plan and figure out which debts should be paid off first, etc. Things were looking up. I get home that night and rather than being greeted with an enthusiastic hug, she points to the loft and mouths, "Not now." I'm on the phone, so I go upstairs and wait for her to finish. While I was waiting I could hear her saying things like, "Yeah, I can get those papers to you and no problem. I can have that ready by tomorrow." Maybe they need identification and proof of my deployment or something. Whatever. Fast forward to later that night and like usual I'm having trouble sleeping. I decide to get on the computer and listen to the podcast from the radio show. After a few searches I find it and start listening to it. This is where my blood starts to boil. She told the DJs that she was a single lady living on her own and that her sister married a Marine and they had a child named Marie, our daughter's middle name. She goes on to say that Marie is now in her custody after the Marine husband, me, sort of was killed in Afghanistan and the mother, her IRL single sister with no kids Jackie, was killed in a car wreck and Marie was now my wife's responsibility. Hundreds of people called in and offered to help, many of which owned business and wanted to offer things like baby supplies or completely furnishing a nursery for her. Literally thousands of people had heard this bull's fabricated story, including some of my co-workers. It was the radio station she was on the phone with and they were asking her to provide death certificates and a birth certificate for Marie, which is why I was shooed away. Hope you exposed all that bulls. We were together for 4 years, married for a pube hair over a year, when I was working 2 jobs, considering a third, and she sat at home, unemployed, again, for the 5th time in a 6-month period. They don't respect me, so she quit. This job isn't fulfilling, so she quit. Everybody gangs up on me, so she quit. etc etc. Our young puppy was not taken care of. House was a mess and I just worked anywhere from 10-14 hours, but sure dear, I'll walk the dog and do the dishes and get the laundry going. No problem. Watching TV or reading are difficult things to do all day. Then I call her one day from work excited that I'm getting out early. She says she can't talk right now in a hush hush manner, and a man's voice in the background, "You can't talk right now? Why not? You have no job and don't do a goddamn thing around the house." Be what? Who's he? What the frick is going on? So I'm working my dong and balls off to pay our bills and provide for us, while you frick around? I don't think so. She decides to stay with some family to take time to figure out if we want to stay together. I was so blindsided by everything that was going on and said we should talk and resolve this together. Why take time and separation to decide? Well, because this way she can frick everyone she sees back in our house and to her mother's house, of course. She comes home one day because she needs clothes and puts some old, random clothes in a bag, but sneakily grabbed all of her lingerie. I didn't notice until I was putting away the laundry she didn't do and noticed it was all gone. That was the moment I left. I didn't give a frick anymore. I'm done. It's not worth it. The lies, manipulation, selfishness, all of it. I'm done. I'm not going to be your little bee anymore. No more free meal ticket for you, you see. Then, for her final power play, she did the classic "I'm suicidal, I'm an alcoholic, bipolar frick addict" and went to a mental hospital. She was released in 3 days, diagnosed with nothing. By B. As much as it absolutely kills me, I even let her keep the dog, because it would be a better life for him. She has a yard, and her family's dogs that he grew up with and played with. I had to move to my parents' basement, with no yard, and I work a new job on an off shift. Now I'm moving across the country, with a better job, with a better, prettier woman, in a better town, minus a complete psychopath. Even if nobody reads this, it was slightly therapeutic to type out. There were many reasons, but this was the final straw. My grandmother was on her deathbed. My ex took this time to throw a childish fit because I ordered food that she didn't like. I realized at that point how completely miserable I was and how freaking short life is. So we divorced. She took all my money and my kids, plus child support. I've still never been happier, and every time I have to interact with her it blows my mind that we made it 9 years. I guess when we were together I was so trained to comply and overlook. I now see what an absolute toxic bully she was. Child support. It's like child support, but from the Aztec. She got drunk on Christmas Eve and told me that she had been using crystal M again and that she would always be an addict, because it was her first love and it was there for her when she was a teenager and her mother died. She finally said she loved it more than she loved being a wife or a mother, and that plenty of people led normal lives while still being users. It crushed me. She was so hungover the next morning that she missed Christmas at my parents' house with our 3-year-old son. I tried to speak to her about it for the next few weeks and she refused to acknowledge the conversation. And things finally came to a head when she started inviting a couple of known H dealers into our home regularly and threatened to move out when I asked that she not bring them around our house or our son anymore. I told her we needed to talk, me, her, and my parents who were trying to help. She flipped out and disappeared for days, and when she tried to come home, I had her crap packed up. Wife asked me to defrost the freezer because of ice buildup. I said okay, was on it immediately, turned on the kettle and filled a few pots with near boiling water and placed them inside. She was too impatient, pushed me aside and then proceeded to grab the longest, sharpest knife from the drawer and starts chipping at the ice in the freezer. 30 seconds later his sounds coming from the freezer as all the freon escapes. Made Emmy buy a new freezer because I made her nervous by taking so long, and that is why she punctured the freezer. This woman was impatient about everything and her impatience ruined everything. Oh man, I did that on accident once. Thought I could just speed things up a bit by chipping away at the ice. Hiss goes the freon. I offered to pay for a replacement multiple times. This was at work and didn't have to, which was weird. I learned my lesson, though. Went to my grandpa's funeral, Disneyland after the service. Flights and board were paid for by my father. She was the most ungrateful and supportive whiny bee the whole weekend. I couldn't believe it. My little sister said my entire family didn't like her or her attitude and was constantly asking why she was there. That really sank in, and at that moment I knew we were done. Don't keep her around if your family can't stand her. They probably don't like her for good reason. Unless of course you hate your family, in which case them disliking her is a good thing. I didn't want a divorce when I realized her drinking was becoming a serious problem. I didn't want a divorce when she ended up comatose from liver failure. I didn't want a divorce when the hospital bills broke through the $1 million cap. I didn't want a divorce when she came out of the coma and tried to get her life back on track. I didn't want a divorce when she became addicted to opioids. I didn't want a divorce when she became addicted to Ambien. I didn't want a divorce when her pill doctor was arrested and she couldn't get her drugs anymore. I didn't want a divorce when she started drinking again. I didn't want a divorce when I was broke, unemployed and hopeless, and all I could think of was how to keep food in our kitchen and my son in school. It was then I realized that if she went back up north and lived in the same town as her large family, she could get the help necessary to get better and I could reduce expenses and see our son graduate high school. The moment I said, yup, I want a divorce was the day she left. Her brother had come down and would drive a U-Haul back up north with her and her stuff. That day, she decided, and became adamant, that she was taking our only vehicle as well. We lived 13 miles from supermarkets, fast food, gas stations, etc., and 26 miles from my son's school. Not having a vehicle wasn't an option, so I stood my ground. She got so mad, and we fought so hard, my son got involved, screaming at her that she can't strand us and she needed to leave right now. So she left, and I started getting back on my feet. The following year, I flew her back for her son's graduation. We were cordial, had a pretty good time, then she left, and that's the last I heard from her, until the following year when I was served divorce papers. We're now divorced. I've moved and I'm back to being confident and successful. I've talked to her once or twice since then, and I'm happier than I've ever been. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.